Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, ready for what the sports universe has thrown at us as I throw it back to you from my lens with the latest podcast on cue, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And it feels good to be here on a Monday morning, recording this in the time frame that I've become accustomed to pretty much since the time I left corporate America to do this on a full-time basis. That's right. So with jury duty the last 2 weeks and having the schedule screwed up, but now that that's in my rearview mirror, it is all about delivering the latest podcast very timely on a Monday where there's a lot to unpack. And of course, I got to start off with what's happening in the NFL in a crazy week 14. And to me, the theme of the weekend has to be the teams that you could honestly say, whether they're on life support or pretty much the pulse is slowly but surely fading fast. And I guess I have to start off with what happened last night in Kansas City, because knowing the run that the Chiefs have had here over the last, almost decade, with the combination of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and last night was a game that we all knew that the Chiefs had to have. We knew that in order for them to stay alive in that AFC playoff race, considering that they were at 500, and I can't even recall the last time they were at 500 this late in the season, but with a Texan team that has been coming on fast and furious. Remember, they started off 0-3, and since then, they're 8-2. Can't say they're the hottest team in the sport because there are two teams well ahead of them in the AFC that have had 10-game winning streaks. Not one, but two teams. That being Denver and New England. With now Denver, with their win yesterday, has the number one seed in the conference over New England, with the Patriots having a bye. But as far as the Chiefs go, that game last night, with all the chaos and confusion of what's gone on over their first 12 games, and with the Texans coming to play with their defense, Patrick Mahomes with the 3 interceptions, but really what it boils down to is one play in the fourth quarter with about, 10 minutes ago or so, where the Kansas City Chiefs had a 4th and 1 at their own 31-yard line. And for whatever the reason, Andy Reid decided to go for it. And listen, I understand you want to play to win. I understand that you have to be aggressive in certain spots. But to me, that was just asinine. And even he admitted it in the postgame, saying that that's on me, I screwed up, and we should have never gone for it. If it was near midfield, which they did in the drive after that at 17-10, where Patrick Mahomes scrambling, trying to find an open receiver, did get Rashee Rice, and the ball went right through his hands with about 6 minutes to go. Or no, I think it was even less than that. But that's a situation where obviously they had to go for it. They were down by 7. But for them to go for it with literally more than 10 minutes to go, and I get it. If he would have made it, it would have been gutsy. Nobody would have second guessed. But upon first guess, watching that, knowing that there was still plenty of quarter to go, if it was maybe 4 minutes to go and they were tied at 10, even then it still would have been questionable. But I would have looked at it as like, all right, well, they're going to try to get the 1 yard and let's see what happens. Of course, they don't have the ground game to support that in my eyes. And even though Kareem Hunt is a guy that could get that 1 yard and is reliable in that regard, despite the fact that Kareem Hunt is a shell of what he once was, dating back to his earlier days in Kansas City. And maybe a lot of people thought they should have gotten the ball at that point there at the 31. Cloud of dust, and hopefully you get that 1 yard and an inch in order for you to move the chains. But that is a call that I know is going to haunt Andy Reid all winter long if they do not make the playoffs. And let's just call it as I see it. I've said this for weeks now, and they've been teetering on the brink. It is over. I don't think the Chiefs, and maybe that's not going out on a limb, I get it at this point, but despite their schedule being relatively easy, they still have the Raiders, they still have Tennessee on their schedule, but they have 0 tiebreakers. Only against Indianapolis, as we know, but Indianapolis, which I'm going to get to in a moment, they're the only team that they have tiebreakers over. They don't have it against Houston. They don't have it against the Chargers right now. They don't have it against Jacksonville. So you can forget it. They don't have it against Buffalo, but Buffalo already has a 3-game lead on them, so you can forget about that. So that is it. We can look at the January slate when it comes to the wild card, etc., barring epic collapses. And I don't see any collapses forthcoming with any of the aforementioned teams. But the Chiefs are not making the playoffs. So we don't have to worry about having to see that red and gold, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift. No, the Chief fatigue, I'm sure there are going to be certain talk shows and debate programs and things of that nature saying, well, they're still mathematically alive, or oh, you can't count them out yet, or oh, it is Patrick Mahomes. Nonsense. I'm laying them to rest on December 8th, 2025, as the Kansas City Chiefs will not make it into the postseason. That's number one. Number two are the Colts. Because the Colts yesterday, and granted they suffered a crippling injury there with Daniel Jones, as you saw there in the field when he took off his helmet and slammed it between his legs, where it was an apparent Achilles injury, non-contact of course, and has been confirmed that he did tear his Achilles. He's done. And I'm sorry, Riley Leonard is not going to cut it here the rest of the year as far as being the backup, the former Notre Dame quarterback. And Anthony Richardson, he's a guy that is the big mystery. I don't know what's up with his health status. I haven't really paid attention, considering that the Colts, who started off 7-1 and now have lost 4 of their last 5, and you could kiss their chances goodbye because their schedule is also a little bit tricky. And with the way that they have been skidding here, and without Daniel Jones, and listen, I'm not trying to make Daniel Jones out to be Johnny Unitas, but if they had any shot to be in this race, it was going to be with he under center and him at the helm, not anybody else. So to me, the Colts are toast. They're done by their loss in Jacksonville yesterday. And Jacksonville now has the 1-game lead in the division, even over the Texans, who after their win last night are 8-5. And they're tied with the Colts there in the NFC South. But as we all know, the Texans are going upward and the Colts are going downward. And that's all I really have to discuss there with the Colts. And then the last team I think that you could pretty much put out the pasture, although there is still a little bit of hope, but their schedule is certainly tricky, are the Baltimore Ravens. And that is a team and a game that I'm going to segue and unpack. Because yesterday, if you follow me on YouTube, which I hope you do, I just recently surpassed 800 subscribers. I'm trying to get to 1,000 by January 1st. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I would implore you to, if you want real, unadulterated, unfiltered, and true sports talk, none of this rage bait, clickbait nonsense, as you know, and passionate, because you know, right from deep in the gut, I got the passion for all the sports. But the Ravens are another team. They're not going to make it. As we saw that yesterday, losing to that game in their building against the Steelers. And yes, I know there are several calls that we're going to get to. Obviously, the Isaiah Likely one, and I'll segue to that in a moment. But I want to talk about the Ravens' chances, because with that loss yesterday, and yes, they are a game behind these Steelers, and yes, they do meet them in Week 18, that if they happen to be still in the running for any shot to win a division, because the only way they're going to get in the playoffs is to win a division, for them, they would have to be a game ahead of the standings just to be at least safe, because right now with the tiebreakers, the Steelers, of course, have the head-to-head right now, but with the division, etc., it's certainly not looking good. But the Ravens, rest of their season, they have to play New England in their building. They go to Cincinnati, where Cincinnati's done. They're toast after that loss yesterday, and that was a real bad turn of events. They led pretty much the whole game. And then the Burrow interception where Christian Benford went the other way for the touchdown, that turned it all around. But who knows? Maybe pride's sake, maybe they feel like they still have an outside shot. The Steelers collapse here. But for Baltimore, they got to go to Cincinnati. Then they host New England. Then go to Green Bay. And then go to Pittsburgh. That schedule is one of the hardest in the sport. And for them to even have a shot to be in the running for the division, they're going to have to go into Pittsburgh with the same amount of wins. So they'll have to run the table just to get to Pittsburgh, at least with a shot to win the division. Because if they're a game behind, having to go to Pittsburgh, the Steelers are going to do whatever it takes to win that game. Is it a guarantee? Absolutely not. But their chances right now are looking pretty slim getting to Pittsburgh with an absolute shot to win the AFC North. Now let's get to the game. So those are the three teams. Now the Lions saved their season the other day. You could talk about the Cowboys. That's another team. Maybe not so much on life support, but yeah, they're certainly not looking good because of that loss day on Thursday night. And it gets forgotten because of the games yesterday, etc. But I didn't think Dallas was going to make the playoffs regardless. Now, let's see what happens tonight with the Eagles. If the Eagles lose in LA to the Chargers, and I'm rooting for the Chargers big time, which I'll get to later on. But if the Eagles lose, then the Cowboys still have that outside shot to win a division. But if the Eagles win, you can forget about it. But I think the Cowboys, they blew their shot there. And even if they run the table, there's no guarantee that they're going to get in. So I think not as dire as the Chiefs, Colts, or even Ravens for that matter, but you could throw them in the same sentence as a team that right now, they are desperate and their playoff hopes are looking grim. Now let's get to the game yesterday. I know that there were several calls that you could look at. We're going to get to the likely touchdown, of course, but you had the one play where Rodgers drew back to pass with about 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Ball was tipped up in the air. As it was coming down, Rodgers looked like he was about to get possession. And both of his knees hit the ground. Now, I don't know if he had full possession at that point because the defender there, Teddy Buchanan, looked like he was about to snatch it away and probably did snatch it away before Rodgers completely got to the ground. But as it was, based on what Gene Steratore said, because he had both knees down and although may not have had full possession, but with the defender on top of Rodgers touching him, right away he's going to be called down and the play is dead. Which, that is the rule. I understand he was trying to go for the ball there and he may have wrestled it away. As it was, you saw Zach Frazier come up with the ball once the scrum was clear. But I can see the Raven fan getting upset at that. Like, how is that not Raven ball? But you saw the replay. I don't have to explain it any further than what I already have. Then you had the leverage play on Travis Jones. 10-3. Steelers about to kick a field goal, 13-3. What happens? He made a move to where he got past the center or the snapper. And because of that, unsportsmanlike 15-yard, half a distance to the goal, Steelers get the ball, and they go in for a touchdown there on Kenneth Gainwell. Now, people could say, wait a minute. That wasn't egregious. That wasn't a play that should have been flagged, etc. And that was the only replay that I saw, the one that was behind the goalpost that you saw. And yes, did he make a move? Obviously, he's going to try to make a move to get past the center to see what he could do to try to block the ball from getting past the line of scrimmage. Wasn't anything egregious from what I saw. And I'm being fair and objective here. I don't have the Steeler pom-poms out, despite the fact my disdain for the Ravens and obviously being a Steeler fan. But that call, unfortunately, is going to be made because they're trying to protect the center there. Is it a bad call? I think it is. It wasn't as if he tried to put his arm or elbow egregiously to where he was pushing the center to the ground or trying to blow up the center in that regard to where he was flat on his back. No, you didn't see any of that. But that was also the same scenario when you think back to the Denver-Indianapolis game. What was it? I think in week 2. Had to be week 2 because since then, or week 3, where the Broncos have been on a roll ever since. And that was off the edge to where the defender had the leverage play on that left tackle or the tight end, whomever was on that side, to where they blew the play up by using that leverage play, and therefore, it may have been that far off to the side. But anyway, they had the re-kick. They gave him 15 yards, and instead of a 60-yard field goal, it was a 45-yarder. The Colts make the field goal, win the game, and that's where Denver loses. So they're going to give the benefit of the doubt, unfortunately, to the offense. And again, you could say it was a bad call. Absolutely. Only because it wasn't anything egregious to the point where it's like, oh, wow, did they have to call that? So you know what? Hand raised high in the air. I'll admit that. And then you had the likely play. The Rasheen Ali with the elbow down, and I know you saw the reaction by Lamar Jackson where he threw his arms up and pointed to the screen, and even John Harbaugh on the sidelines. And when Ali had his elbow down, although his knee wasn't down, then he ran into the end zone and they thought it was a touchdown. Nonsense. But let's get to the likely play, because this has blown up my comments on my YouTube channel. You can definitely check it out. Please feel free. One more time, if you haven't subscribed, I really suggest and implore you to do so. It'll help out the channel in a big way as I try to get to 1,000 subscribers. So please, people, I'd appreciate it. But on first glance, 4th and 5, we know the play. Finds likely. Arms outstretched, catch the ball, keeps his arms outstretched. Joey Porter Jr., who had an awful game, to his credit, pokes the ball out. And even though he poked the ball out, I said, is that going to be enough to overturn it? Is that going to be enough? Because he had both feet down. It looked like the play was finished. But here, and I'm sure the rules committee are going to look at this in the offseason, because this is a play that's going to be talked about here this morning, this afternoon, Monday Night Football, and throughout the week. Was this a touchdown 25 years ago? Absolutely. Now, because of the Calvin Johnson play, remember that? And I just watched it a short time ago, where he made the catch, fell to the ground, and as he was getting up, the ball squibs out, and they called it no touchdown. Because he didn't make that football move to complete the play, whatever you want to call that, quote unquote. And because he had first step, second step, still arms outstretched, but as he was right to get to that third step, poked out. And therefore, all of those plays are reviewed. Tomlin didn't have to throw the flag, which, again, Tomlin is terrible with these challenges, as you saw there in the first quarter, the Zay Flowers. And I understand it was a big gain, whatever, but I didn't see any conclusive evidence that that should have been overturned. And as it was, it just led to a field goal. But for them to overturn that, and I understand people say, oh, you never watched football in your life, or you don't even know. In fact, Tony Romo didn't even know the rule. Romo was saying, oh, I thought that was a touchdown, so on and so forth. Where Gene Steratore had to come in to say, guys, he didn't complete the play, or whatever, to paraphrase, he has to make that football move. Of course he wasn't going to tuck the ball, because then obviously Porter would have had even a better shot to poke it away. But because he didn't take that third step and his arms weren't long enough in order for him to secure the ball to where, let's say if he got that third step and maybe even a fourth step, they would have said, no, he completed the play. Therefore, it's not a touchdown. And again, don't kill the messenger. I'm not the one that's made up the rule. And everybody's getting at me, you're a bozo. You never watched football in your life. I'm like, what? Please. And even when I watched the replay, I jumped up out of my sofa to say, they're probably going to overturn that. It wasn't a full football play. So therefore, no touchdown. And I get it that the fans could be up in arms. I get it that the fans could be irate, incensed, etc. Because that would have put them up by 1 with a chance to go up by 3, because they would have gone for 2 there. It was late in the fourth quarter. And instead, turnover on downs. So I understand how the Raven fan could be in chagrin, because I would be too. And as a Steeler fan, I've seen it, different set of circumstances, but close. The Jesse James touchdown in that 2017 game in December against the Patriots, which would have solidified the 1 seed for the Steelers. And as we know, they lost to Jacksonville, which, let me not even go there. But remember, Jesse James catches the ball, and as he's falling to the ground, the ball squibs out, and they down him at the 1-yard line. Because although he thought he broke the plane of the goal line, but he didn't have the full possession, so therefore they had the ball at the 1. Steelers had 4 shots to get a touchdown. They didn't get the touchdown. We know what happened. Lose the game, lose the 1 seed, and obviously did not face the Patriots in the championship game, despite the fact that Tomlin was chirping, etc. So, I don't know what more else to say or even add to that, people. If anything, take it up with the Rules Committee, and I would think that they should actually take a good, long, hard look at this moving forward. Whether or not it should be, in a case like that with a touchdown, should it just be the 2 feet and that's it? Forget about completing the play. As long as he obviously breaks the play on the goal line, has both feet to complete the play, and then that's it. They don't need to be a third step involved or to complete the play. I mean, that should be it. On plays like that. Or let's say it was a play for a first down, and let's say he was trying to outstretch. He was trying to get stretched out to get the first down, and let's say the ball gets knocked away. Whatever it may be. They have to go back, the rules committee, and fix that because it's a terrible rule. It's not the call, it's the rule, people. So as much as you want to get on the refs, I know it's Alex Moore's his first year as a ref, and maybe he didn't have a great game overall, but what more can you say? And the Steelers, I'll say this real quick before I move on. That was a gut check of a win for that team. Considering what happened the week before, and I was cursing them from pillar to post, how awful they were, and they still gave up over 200 yards on the ground yesterday, as it was on top of what Buffalo did to them the week before. But they were aggressive offensively, especially in the first half, even into the third quarter, I'll say, because in the fourth quarter, it was almost as if they were sitting on the lead. But Aaron Rodgers, big game, and I will say this about him. Is he washed? Is he through? 100%. But when you give him time, and the Ravens have zero pass rush, none. They didn't even lay a finger on him, other than that one play that we talked about with the ball up in the air and he came down with it. But when he is in that pocket, and when he has a moment, and he had to slip out from a little bit of a rush at times, but boy, he can still throw the football. He could be 80 years old, and he'll still throw it on a dime. That's the one thing he hasn't lost. He still has that zip on his fastball, and if he does have time, and if he's able to make a play, I think that he can still play. But we all know, once he faces a pass rush, and I mean, come on. But he's still showing that he can play the position, as evidenced yesterday. But we all know his best days are behind him. But let's see, is this going to carry the Steelers to the end of the day to make it into the postseason? Now they have Miami on a Monday night, who's played a lot better. 2-7, they've won their last 4, and they may think that they have an outside shot, despite the fact that they don't. I mean, they're still mathematically alive, but there are a million teams at 6-7, and But they have them. Now they go to Detroit, which is going to be a playoff game, but then they go to Cleveland after that, which Cleveland a little feisty, and I know there was some controversy in the game there yesterday, which I didn't really follow because I was wrapped up in my game. And then the Ravens for Week 18 in the final game of the year. I mean, they should win the division, and they should have 9 wins if you're going to give Miami and Cleveland going into that final game. But we see. We shall see, because we all know anything can happen here in the NFL. But those are the big storylines. Now, as far as any of the other games we want to unpack, I said about Cincinnati, no need to go there. Buffalo, they win in the snow, which was a great aesthetic to always watch. And obviously, I couldn't follow that as closely being involved in the Steeler game. Seattle beats Atlanta, big whoop there. Tennessee, Cleveland. I know there was some controversy there at the end. I didn't really follow it that much. I know Shador, you can look at the numbers. He threw for 364 in the game. He started off 8 for 13 and did not end well. Although the numbers are great. 23 for 42, 3 touchdowns, 364. Now listen, it's against the Titans. But they're an NFL team and an NFL defense, I get it. And let me see if I could pull up what the issue was there at the end. And Shador, listen, I get it that the numbers may not have been, they look great at the end, but maybe from the time when he was 8 for 13 and had 2 touchdowns since then, if you do the math, what was he, 15 for 28 or whatever it was, I believe it was. But yeah, Cleveland attempted an onside kick. Oh, whatever it was, they ended up falling short. And Shador with the big numbers, I mean, good for him. But that's a game that nobody's going to pay attention to. Minnesota's shutting out Washington. Who cares? I know Jaden Daniels came back, but look at that. I mean, obviously had no effect in the game. Miami beating the Jets. Big whoop there. Denver beating Las Vegas. Who cares? Rams killing Arizona. Who cares? Chicago, Green Bay. And also New Orleans, Tampa Bay, which that was a bit of a surprise too. And Tyler Shuck is showing some ability, but Tampa's falling apart here. And Tampa now tied with Carolina, I might add, although they have the tiebreaker because they have the better division record. No, wait. Is it the division record? I think they have the better division record as of right now. Or is it tied? No, in fact, I hate this tiebreaker. It goes head-to-head division. Then it goes the opponents, the schedule against the opponents, and then the conference. where it should be conference over the record against common opponents. And I hate that. So that's something I look at because Carolina, remember, they're going to play each other, I believe as early as next week, right? Isn't it their first game next week? They're going to play each other, no, it's the week after that, 2 of the final 3 weeks of the season, Carolina and Tampa. And that's going to be for the division because they're both tied at 7-6. But Chicago, Green Bay. Chicago showed a lot of fight here. They had to come back on a couple of occasions, and I hated that final play call. And at that point, I didn't watch the game. I was wrapped up in other things at the time. People said, well, JAYREELZ, come on. Well, listen, from 1 to about 4:15, I'm yelling my head off about the Steelers. So I was in and out of that game, and I understand it got interesting there late, especially the game at 28-21 when the Bears came back to tie it. And here they were deep in Packer territory on a 4th and 1. And even though the play call, to me, was similar to that play call on Black Friday when at 17-9, Caleb Williams rolled out. It looked like it was going to go into the flat, but because it was covered, and then he found the tight end, and it was Colston Loveland on Black Friday to where they extended the lead to 24-9. To me, that was the same play, but this one was intercepted. And that's where the game ended. And, all right, I understand. I'm not in love with the play call, how they did on the ground yesterday, considering that they have been very good on the ground here. Listen, DeAndre Swift was 13 for 63, and as a team, they rushed the ball for a total of 138 yards. So they did pretty decent on the ground. They couldn't pound that for a yard there instead, or maybe have gone with a different play. And obviously was snuffed out, nobody interception. And when I watched that, the first thing I thought about was the game on Black Friday. Go back and watch that play that made the score 24-9, and then watch that play that ended the game yesterday. It's the same exact play. So maybe they saw that on film and thought up, and that's why they got the interception. So, listen, the Bears were game, and to think, the Bears were a 1 seed going into yesterday, and because of that loss, they dropped all the way to 7. So, I'm sure, and they're in good stead to make the postseason, but yeah, that was a tough defeat on many levels to think that you were literally in the penthouse and then you went right to the basement of the playoff picture. And then the other game I want to get to yesterday was, no, I think that's it, right? Hold on. Let me just double check. Yeah, New Orleans, Tampa. Obviously, we talked Houston, Kansas City. No, that's it. Yeah, I wanted to get into that Chicago-Green Bay game. And Green Bay, because of that tie, the Rams have the 1 seed as of currently constituted. And as we go through these standings real quick, right now, and they're doing it by conference, not by division, of course. You have Denver, New England. Denver with the bye. New England is the 2 seed based on the tiebreaker because they have a better conference record as of right now. 7-2 over 6-2. Not even the common opponents because, again, in the division it's different. Jacksonville, 9-4. Pittsburgh, 7-6. Buffalo, 9-4. They're the 5 seed. Chargers, who play tonight against Philly, I'm going to root hard for them because if they win tonight, they will have a better conference record than Buffalo. And I'd rather play the Chargers in Pittsburgh than have Buffalo come back there, considering that they played with them for a half until it all imploded. And the Steelers did lose to the Chargers earlier this year, but that was in SoFi. But rooting for the Chargers big time, and you have Houston as the 7th seed at 8-5. Now you have the Colts at 8-5 outside looking in, but you also have to remember this too. Texans have the tiebreaker over the Colts as of right this very moment. So, and they also have a better division record. Hold on. Yeah, and they play the Colts in the final game of the season, so it could come down to that for a division, but we would think that's going to be over and out by then, or for a final wildcard spot. Then you have the Ravens and Chiefs at 6-7, 2 games behind the Texans in the conference. And remember, as I said earlier, both Kansas City and Baltimore do not have tiebreakers over Houston. That's why they're on life support when it comes to the playoffs. And then you have the Dolphins who are 6-7. They're 3-6 in the conference. And yes, I understand mathematically alive, but they go to Pittsburgh next Monday night. That's what you have there in the AFC. NFC, Rams, then Green Bay second. Philly is third. Now, if Philly wins tonight, although they did beat Green Bay earlier this year on Monday night, but because of that tie, they'll still have the 2 seed. So Philly at 3, Tampa at 4. Seattle is 5 at 10 and 3, but remember, they don't have the tiebreaker against the Rams because they lost to them head-to-head. San Francisco 9 and 4. Chicago also 9 and 4. They are ahead of them in the conference. And remember, Chicago plays San Francisco, I believe, the week after next. And that's going to be huge as far as who's going to get the tiebreaker there, as far as who's 6 or who's 7, at least as of right this very moment. Then you have the Lions, 8 and 5, which they control their own destiny when you think about it, because even though they're on the outside looking in, they do have the tiebreaker advantage over Chicago, beating them in week 2, and they'll play them in Soldier Field at the end of the year. But the problem is they have to go to LA to play the Rams. They play the Steelers the week after that. Then they go to the Vikings and then the Bears to close out the year. Very tricky schedule. And then Carolina, a fringe wildcard team, but I would concentrate on the division right now because of those 2 games against Tampa in week 16 and 18. And then you have Dallas, who are 6-6 and 1, but like I said, they're 6-6 and 1, and the final playoff spot belongs to the Bears at 9 wins. They're going to have the same amount of wins when it's all said and done. So they're going to have to run the table and hope for the Bears or Niners to finish at 10 wins in order for them to make the playoffs. That is not going to happen. So that is your playoff picture to date. That is what's happening in the NFL, and you know we'll be on top of it as we move it along here throughout the month of December. Now I'll stick to football, but now I'll go through the college circuit, because what we have here as far as the committee and whatever it was that they were thinking, and yes, they're going to have their valid reasons, etc., but we don't have to agree with them. It is twofold. Now, we can talk about the conference championships and all that, and maybe I should start with them before I get to the college football playoff scenario with the committee, so I'll keep you in suspense here for the next few minutes. But what to take away from this weekend? Not a whole hell of a lot. And I say that because the conference championships, although it's money, because when you look at the Power 4, they're going to want to have, they're going to want to have a Big Ten championship. You're going to want to have an SEC championship, a Big 12, ACC, etc. I get it, because it does generate money. But when you look at how everything unfolded, and for so many different reasons, let's just go with the Power 4. Ohio State, Indiana. Indiana wins the game. Obviously, they play tremendous defense. You think about Indiana winning their first Big Ten championship since 1967. But, grand scheme of things, Ohio State's going to get a bye. Indiana's your 1 seed. I'm going to talk about them later on in this segment. But they play for nothing. It's not as if they were playing to get in or playing for a 1 seed and then the other team was going to be out. No, certainly wasn't high stakes like that. To me, Ohio State could have lost by 50 and they still would have been a bye. I'll explain further about that in a little bit when it comes to another team in this 12-team tournament. Then you have the Big 12 championship. BYU, Texas Tech. Texas Tech did what they did weeks ago in Lubbock, and then they beat them again, where BYU, although at 13-7, that's when the game changed on a dime, but they had no shot. And therefore, if BYU would have won, they would have made it into the tournament. But because they didn't, another team was ushered in, which I'll get to. That's the ACC. As far as the SEC championship, Alabama, 21-0. Couldn't get anything going on offense. Ty Simpson, the quarterback, not have a good game. Gunnar Stockton had a better game. And Kirby Smart, certainly looking good. Georgia, maybe. Although not ranked number 1, but could be pound for pound the best team in college football. I understand there are going to be some Hoosier fans and people out of Bloomington will think otherwise because of where they stand. But right now, Georgia is looking as formidable as any team in college football. But with Alabama, a no-show. did not play well in the game, as you saw. Lost 28-7, down 21-0. And, yeah, 3 losses under their belt. I get it's the SEC. But again, they beat them earlier this year, as you know, but they couldn't beat them here. And therefore, it's not as if that loss by Alabama was going to be an ouster for them in the grand scheme of things, as of course we'll get to in a matter of seconds. Because in the ACC championship, you had Duke play Virginia. Miami, what happened to them? Well, Miami, because of some quirky tiebreaker rule, Duke was playing in the game over Miami, which they gotta revisit that. How is Duke 8-5, Miami 10-2, not in that game on Saturday? Could someone explain that? And as it was, as the college football gods would have it, what happens? Duke beats Virginia in overtime. And they're celebrating, going crazy, thinking that they actually have an outside shot to make it into the tournament, considering that they're the ACC champs with 5 losses. So now you're thinking to yourself, well, Miami didn't even make it to the title game. Duke won. I don't think they're going to make it, but how does Miami get in, considering that Notre Dame is ranked in the top 10? Maybe they'll get in because of Alabama and their loss against Georgia in the SEC championship game. And this is what you're thinking Saturday night, Sunday morning. You just throw your arms up in the air and see what's going to happen. So here's what happens. James Madison and Tulane, who won their respective conferences, and you figure that if BYU won, one of those 2 teams was going to be out. Done. No way. But BYU loses. All right, so if you thought BYU lost, that means Notre Dame's a shoo-in. Quite frankly, Miami would probably get in through the back door, and they would either select James Madison or Tulane as one of the 2 teams that would get in to the tournament. That was not the case. For whatever the reason, Miami gets in, and that's based on their tiebreaker over Notre Dame in week 1, and that counts for something. It has to. I get it. It was all the way back in August. It was almost forgotten among certain people in certain parts. But, all right, they gave them the benefit of the doubt because of the head-to-head. Fine, no problem. Even though they had terrible losses to Louisville and SMU on the road, where the Fighting Irish did lose to Miami, but also Texas A&M. Both games on the road, despite the fact that they play an abysmal schedule. And no, I'm not going to count USC. All right, they were ranked, or even Pittsburgh for that matter, also ranked, because Miami also beat them too, and I'm sure they probably factored that into the mix as well. But how in the hell, everything that I just laid out with Alabama, how in the hell did they make it into the playoff and not Notre Dame, considering that Notre Dame was ranked? I understand Alabama was 2, but they have 3 losses to Notre Dame's 2, number 1. Number 2, yes, SEC, tougher schedule, blah, blah, blah. But they lost 3 games and won to Florida State. Florida State is, please, where have they been over the last God knows how long? Now, I understand they could have made it to a bowl a few years ago, Jordan Travis, I get it. But they lost to them along the way. How is it that they get, I don't want to say embarrassed, but they weren't even in the game? If they lost 28-24, fine. Put Alabama in the tournament. You would still get the Fighting Irish fans and the people out of South Bend just absolutely floored and exasperated. I get it. But for them to get beaten the way they did, and for them to get that spot, and they're going to play Oklahoma, which is going to be a rematch of the game and one of the losses that they had this year when Oklahoma went into Tuscaloosa and beat them. And as it is, they're going to have to go to Oklahoma and watch Alabama win to show the world that, I told you we belong. You can't make it up. You cannot make it up. I don't care who you are. I don't care how you slice it, how you cut it, etc. Notre Dame got robbed. And I'm not a Notre Dame fan in the least. And I'm sure that to my dear and longtime friend of over 40 years, John Irving, the biggest Notre Dame fan that I know, I'm sure that the bagel with cream cheese and hot chocolate yesterday did not go down well when he watched that selection process to where Notre Dame was out and Alabama in. I mean, you can't make it up. That was a travesty. And then Miami gets in. They weren't even in the championship game. But I understand they had the fallback because they beat Notre Dame. That's the only reason why they got in. The only reason. And you can even argue Notre Dame belongs in there over Miami, but it's hard to because of the head-to-head. But the reason that the committee did not pick Notre Dame is because they felt that Alabama, their strength of schedule and strength of conference, and considering everything I mentioned about Notre Dame and their schedule, and etc. All right, fine. Understood. But, and here's the big but, with Notre Dame not being in the college football playoff, they said, we're withdrawing our name for being a part of any bowl that's forthcoming. And you know what? I understand that may be sour grapes. I understand that maybe, we're taking our ball and going home. Fine. But you know what? In this case, they have every right to. I may be in the minority saying that. I know I may sound like a sore loser. And again, I am not a Notre Dame fan in the least. But they got absolutely snow jobbed. And there's no way else to cut it. And listen, Duke wasn't going to get in, so I don't care. The 5 Duke, I can't even speak right now. The 5 Blue Devil fans, I'm thinking Duke Blue Devils trying to say that all in one word. The 5 Blue Devil fans that root for the college football team outside of Durham or North Carolina, no way. Don't deserve it. You can hang the banner in your building or in the stadium, but But yeah, they want to say bye-bye, put in another X team there to face off against whomever. You can keep the money. We don't care. Hey, I feel the same way. So you know what? Hats off to them. So now here's your matchups. Starting a week from this coming Friday, you're going to have James Madison, your 12 seed, go up against Oregon, who will then, if Oregon wins, they will end up playing Texas Tech. Oh, no, they will end up playing because they're right, because it's the whole bracket. Because then you'll have Alabama, Oklahoma, as you know, which will go up against Indiana in that bracket. Tulane, Ole Miss, go up against Georgia, Miami, Texas A&M, Ohio State. And that'd be interesting. When Miami wins that game, you'll have people will think back to that championship game of Ohio State-Miami back in, 2002? So, for nostalgic sake. But here's the one thing I want to get to before I move on. Indiana, with their win, and they were impressive defensively, and made plays where they absolutely had to. And I understand that in the game against Indiana, that Ohio State had a chance at a 4th and 1. What was that? I think it was at the Indiana 5. And that was late in the third quarter. But they overturned their call because Julian Sain was short on that. And that's where you got to give up the defense there for Indiana. I understand they missed a field goal late there to tie the game. But here's the thing with Indiana now, that the bullseye is on them. That's not to say they're not going to do well or underperform or whatever, but now they're going to get into the deep end of the pool. They're going to read a couple of weeks how there's going to be a lot of teams, and they can use it as fuel, but there's a lot of people that are not going to root for them, especially in the opening round. And let's say if it is Oregon. Oh, excuse me, I'm looking at this wrong. Let's say it is Oklahoma or even Alabama for that matter. Because Alabama's going to have a chip on their shoulder thinking that a lot of people thought they're going to be out. And watch them go in there and try to run the table. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Indiana for them to not only just win the first round or their first game, but to get to a championship game and even more so win. Because anything short of getting to a championship game is going to be a failure. And I don't want to hear, this is the longest they've gone. Oh, wow, nobody expected this, blah, blah. No, you are undefeated. You beat Ohio State and you're the 1 seed. So they got to get minimum to a championship game. Minimum. I don't care if they lose in 100 overtimes in the semifinal. I do not care. They have to get to a championship game in my eyes to validate the season and even win the title, considering that they are the top-ranked team in the nation. But you know what? If they go up against, let's say, Georgia, and Georgia blows their doors off, all right, fine, and they lose 34-6, you're going to look at it more as Georgia than it is Indiana. Although I'm sure people will pound Indiana along the way. But I need to see that from Indiana. So, and remind you, they're going to have that extra week off because of the bye. And remember last year, not to say it's going to happen this year, but all the bye teams last year, and I understand you had Boise and Arizona State as two of those teams, but also Oregon was one. Those teams did not win. The ones that had the bye last year. So keep that in mind as you move it along into this year after the opening round and what that's going to lie for the quarterfinal round once we get past the weekend after next. So we shall see. And that's another thing too, I will say, I even typed this down real quick. Kurt Cignetti got that extension in Indiana. Well, now we'll see how much he's going to be worth it once we get into this tournament and once they begin in what? 2.5 weeks. All right, let's turn my attention to the NBA as I lace up the high tops and go through the association here real quick. The NBA Cup begins tomorrow. You're going to have the 4 games, 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday. And I think that's actually pretty intriguing because of the teams that are playing in this NBA Cup. Now, you'll have the Eastern teams play tomorrow. That being, and I'll do it in order, just the first game and the second game, because I believe the first game is Miami and Orlando. As I get to the schedule here. Schedule? Here we go. Now, Miami-Orlando's a 6 o'clock game. All these opening games here are on Prime. I guess all of them are on Prime too. Let me see the game Saturday. I guess the whole NBA Cup is going to be on Prime. Miami and Orlando and New York at Toronto. That's Tuesday. Followed Wednesday, Phoenix, Oklahoma City, which that's an interesting game, and I'll get to that in a minute. San Antonio at the Lakers. So 6, 8:30 tomorrow night. Wednesday, 7:30 and 10 o'clock for the West games. Now, you have big-time teams there. Obviously, the Knicks, Lakers, OKC, and then you have the other teams that have been surprises this year. Miami, Toronto, Phoenix, San Antonio, no Wembanyama, so it's going to lose a little luster there. And even Orlando's a young team, but they've they've been inconsistent. I'll just put it that way. So I'm sure what the league office is hoping and praying for is a Knick-Laker NBA Cup final. So when we look at the semifinals, which will take place Saturday, 5:30 and 9, and then of course Tuesday is the final itself. They would want New York, LA. Now the thing is, the game's going to be played in Las Vegas. So it's not a situation where, is the game going to be at the Garden or is it going to be at Staples, aka Crypto.com? No, it's not. It's going to be, I guess, at the T-Mobile Arena there in Vegas. Listen, I don't follow the NBA Cup. I'm not one that is invested in all these rounds and how it breaks down. But I will say this, a New York, LA would be good for the league. But then again, you have Oklahoma City there, and I'm sure Oklahoma City, LA is what a lot of people are going to want to see, considering what the Thunder have done this year. And that's why that game on Wednesday between the Suns and Thunder is a big game, and for this reason. The Thunder are currently 23-1. They can match the best start in NBA history with a win there against the Suns. Because if you remember, in the 73-9 year where the Warriors, they started off 24-0. And they got that 24th win in Boston before going to Milwaukee the next night when they lost their first game of the year. So, and these games count. Now, the Cup game, the championship game, does not count toward the standings. But the quarterfinals, semifinals, they do. So if the Thunder win against Phoenix on Wednesday, they will match the best start in NBA history. Now, whether that means something to the Thunder, who knows? I haven't heard a lot of press about it, but they have just been world beaters. And I don't know. They've won 15 in a row. I mean, what is happening here? Do they really have an outside shot, as I talked about on my channel there last week, to break the Warrior record? Well, they're certainly on pace. And right now, if you do the math, they're on pace to go, let's see. They're on pace to go like 77-5 or 78-4. I mean, come on. So, what are we talking about here? And you want to talk about pressure. Imagine if they break the Warrior record, regular season, they have to win the title. And who knows if they steamroll through the Western Conference, which will be tricky because Denver and the Lakers, but win a title? I know it's only December the 8th, but am I already talking about the greatest team of all time? I pumped the brakes on that, but you can't get off to a better start than that. I understand they had the one loss, but please, 23-1 to go for 24-1, we shall see. But that's what's really happening with the association. We'll see what's going to happen as we get to Thursday. I'll talk a little bit about it. Maybe I'll watch some of these games. I don't know how much I'm going to be invested because it's not like, who's going to make it to the semifinals of the NBA Cup? I mean, I could tell you who won the Cups in the first 2 years, Lakers and Bucks, but and who knows? Maybe for the Knicks fan, I'm curious. Maybe I'll put that on my channel. Knicks fans, are you that invested in this NBA Cup to where if you do get to a final and win, would you be ecstatic? Or would you be like, no, I want the real thing, not this NBA Cup? So I'm going to have to take the pulse of the Knicks fan on that. But besides that, I know the Lakers-Celtic game the other day, the Celtics are playing well. Celtics have won 5 in a row, 10 of 12, and I get at the game on Friday. Lakers-Celtics, they renewed the old rivalry. No LeBron, no Luka. I get it, but remember, was it last year? I think it was last year. They had no LeBron, no AD, because they played early on in the year before the trade, and the Lakers beat the Celtics, and they beat them handily. But I understand, you're not going to have your two best players there. And Austin Reeves, I know he started off slow, but ended up playing well. But the Celtics have 10 of 12. Jaylen Brown's almost averaging 30 a game. And they've gotten some good contributions from the Neemias Quetzas of the world. And Peyton Pritchard, who's now a starter. He's made big-time contributions. And listen, Celtics now 15-9. I'm not expecting big things out of them this year. But you know what? I got to give them some credit. After a sluggish start, winning 10 of 12 has certainly helped. And now here they are at 15-9 in the Eastern Conference. And then you also have KD, who eclipsed the 31,000 point mark with Wilt up next. And you even had James Harden pass Carmelo Anthony for 10th all time in scoring as far as league history goes. So I just had to throw those two, the former teammates, not only in OKC but also in Brooklyn, as they are now well into the top 10 in scoring all time. And then Giannis is going to be out 4 more weeks with a calf strain. I know that that's been a lot of the talk. And I mentioned this a little bit on the podcast Thursday, to where Giannis talks with the front office on maybe another landing spot for him, maybe the Knicks. But with this calf strain, who knows how serious it is. He's going to be out 4 weeks, as said by the coach Doc Rivers. So I'm sure a trade, which not going to say could have been imminent, but I'm sure it's going to be a big pause, knowing that he's going to be out probably until the new year. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But as far as overall, yeah, I can't really get into anything else. If we talk about the Celtics, obviously the Thunder and what they've done here. But Pistons still playing well, tops of the East. The Heat have cooled off a little bit after they were 14-7. But they still overachieved. Because outside of Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro and maybe Andrew Wiggins, I mean, can you pick these guys out of a lineup? I don't think not. Yeah, Bulls have... Bulls, remember when they started off, I think, 5-0? Now they are 9-14, so they've been 4-14 since. So they have come crashing back to earth. And then out west, Nuggets, Rockets. T-Wolves have played well. They won 5 in a row. Pelicans, 3-21. Hideous. Clippers, 6-18. And remember about the Clippers, people. They're 6-18. Do you know who their number 1 pick goes to? OKC. Unbelievable. That trade, oh my God. I'm sure Sam Presti is like New Year's Eve every day. And who's the GM of the... Lawrence Frank. So that's what you have at the NBA. And the schedule this week, we know about Tuesday, Wednesday, but you do have games being played tonight. You have Sacramento, Indiana, Phoenix, and Minnesota, San Antonio, and New Orleans. So certainly not a big-time schedule. Phoenix, Minnesota's on Peacock. So that's what you have there. As I lace up the skates and turn my attention to the NHL, the Eastern Conference, and I'm going to say the Metropolitan, albeit they're separated by 1 point between them and the Atlantic, but you're looking at a Royal Rumble or Battle Royale with these teams, and we still have another third of the season to go before it's all said and done. But my takeaway, and I'll start with the Metropolitan. I remember when it seemed like just a few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, when it was Carolina, or not only that, the Devils, Carolina, Washington. The top 3 spots in the division. Here we are now on December 8th. The Capitals are playing well as they shot up to the top of the division. Not to say they're on the similar track to what they were last year when they led the NHL. Not the Winnipeg Jets had the President's Trophy and led the NHL in points, but the Capitals had the 1 seed and led the East as far as the most points in the conference. Well, now they're at the top, where Carolina's second, the Islanders third, the Devils went all the way down to 7th. And the Penguins, who are also close to the top, right now they're 4th. But we could talk about how even the Devils have slipped so far down to where, how are they 7th? But here's the thing. They're 6 points behind the Capitals for the top spot in the Metropolitan Division. And with the Blue Jackets 1 point behind them, 7 points separates the top team in the Capitals and the Columbus Blue Jackets at 8. So you could probably shuffle this deck in 2 weeks, and you may see the Islanders in first place for all we know, Carolina in third, Washington in second, so who knows? And the same can be said for the Atlantic Division because you have Tampa at 34, and at the bottom of that is the Sabres at 26. Now, nobody's expecting the Sabres to be in the running there in that division. But with Tampa tied with Boston, both teams a point ahead of Montreal and Detroit. So you have 4 teams that are separated by a point at the top. Then you have 3 teams, Florida, Toronto, and Ottawa, all with 30 points. So they're just literally 4 points behind both Tampa and Boston. And then Buffalo at 26, which they're 4 points behind the 3 teams that have 30, Panthers, Maple Leafs, and Senators. But you talk about 2 divisions that are right now literally in a blender. Just zzz, and who knows after each week what the flavor is going to be like as to who's going to be on top, who's going to be in the middle, and who's going to be on the bottom. Because right now it's looking like from week to week, it is just going to be pick a name out of a hat and, oh, that team's in first place. Out west is different. Colorado, who was in town recently and suffered their second loss in regulation as the Islanders beat them up pretty good there on Thursday night 6-3, and then they won in overtime both over the weekend in the Garden on Saturday, where the likely MVP and right now the MVP of the league, Nathan McKinnon, scored 2 goals, including 1 in overtime. And then yesterday, where you had them in Philadelphia and they beat the Flyers in overtime as well, 3-2. I believe that was in a shootout, though, where the Ranger game was just in overtime. But 2 losses, and the other loss in regulation was against the Bruins. Was it against the Bruins? Colorado? I think it was. Against Boston earlier this year. And listen, between them and Nashville, they're separated by 24 points. So obviously there's no 7 or 8 point difference between the top team and the bottom team in the division. And then in the Pacific, Anaheim at 37, Vancouver at 25, that's 12 points. So that's why the theme, not only is the East, but the Metropolitan in particular, then the Atlantic, because a lot of those teams are mixed up, and will there be, you would think there'll be some separation as we move it along, but I don't know. Other than the Sabres, I could see that being a mess there in the Atlantic, same for the Metropolitan, to where there may not be that much more separation as you see out west with Colorado. And the thing is, they have the most points in the sport at 48, but the Dallas Stars are just 3 points behind them at 25-5. So, and there's 10 points after that, where Minnesota's at 35 points. So they certainly look like they're going to be the top 2 teams coming out of there, where the Wild will have to go to Dallas if the season ended today. And then Utah with 31 points. And then in the Pacific, Vegas, who currently right now is in the Metropolitan area, as they were in New Jersey Friday. They shut out the Devils, and then they beat the Rangers there last night at the Garden. They'll play the Islanders tomorrow night out at UBS. So they'll make their East Coast tri-state area trip. We'll conclude there tomorrow night. Again, and that game is on TNT HBO Max. Tomorrow night there out in the island. And that's pretty much what you have there in the NHL. So with the schedule, which I always seem to forget the schedule. I forgot it there on Thursday. I know the previous Thursdays I forgot, so that is my sincerest apologies. Hand raised high in the air. Tonight, Tampa, Toronto. Kings against Utah. Buffalo, Calgary, Detroit, Vancouver, Minnesota, Seattle. Then you have Tampa and Montreal. This is tomorrow night. Jersey at Ottawa. Vegas at New York, as you know. San Jose, who's played very well. They were the last team to record a win in regulation, and they actually give it up. They're in Philadelphia, and I'm in Pittsburgh, Columbus, Carolina, Boston, St. Louis, Dallas, Winnipeg, Buffalo, Edmonton, Colorado, Nashville. And then Wednesday night, Original Six. You like to see it. Rangers at Blackhawks, TNT, HBO, etc. Then you have LA at Seattle. Then Detroit at Calgary, Florida at Utah, which will round out your schedule here for the early part of the week. And news and notes, nothing to really discuss coming out of the NHL. And then lastly, with the baseball, as I get into the batter's box with the cleats, batting gloves, and the bat, I wonder what kind of response, and mind you, they started yesterday. All the GMs, they migrated down to Orlando, checked in, and I'm sure their talk's fast and furious as of right now. Let's see if I can pull up anything, MLB.com or any of the other. No, you don't see anything as of yet. But I wonder what kind of buzz are we going to get here? Is it going to, let's say, starting today or this afternoon, is it going to be fast and furious, a lot of rumors, a lot of reports, or is it going to be a thing where it's going to be gradual as you get into tomorrow? All right, now we hear some rumblings. Oh, this person signed, or this player. I don't know if you're going to have a lot of big-time players sign here in the next few days. And I'm talking about the Pete Alonsos, the Kyle Tuckers, the Cody Bellingers, the Framber Valdezes, the Alex Bregmans. I'm talking about the guys that you know that once they sign somewhere, it's going to maybe not be a seismic shift, but you're going to feel the rumblings on your feet like, oh, what happened? What did they sign for? How long, etc. You may get a couple of players, but I don't know if you're going to get a flurry. And who knows with trades? Trades are unpredictable. But there have been some minor trades that have gone on here where I know the Pirates, they sent the kid Johan Oviedo to the Red Sox as they try to shore up their rotation. And I know there was another move made. If I pull that up here real quick. Yeah, Cedric Mullins signs with the Rays for 1 year. I mean, that's no big deal. And Diamondbacks had Mike Soroka. Seriously. I see here that they're going to broadcast Mets-Dodgers on April 15th. That game is in LA, Jackie Robinson Day. So that's ESPN's first 2026 MLB broadcast is going to be on Jackie Robinson Day. Mets-Dodgers. Makes sense. Dodgers, of course, a team that Jackie played on, and the Mets, obviously the New York connection, so there you go. But I don't know. I don't know if you're going to get some juicy... Listen, there's storylines. We know the free agents are, but I don't know what's going to come out of this. I'll have to say, you're going to get something. I don't think you're going to get nothing, but you're not going to get what we all want. And that's get the big guy signed. Maybe a couple, but I don't think anything more than that. Because you haven't heard anything leading up to this week. And we're already underway. And I'm sure there's a lot of going on. The John Heymans, the Bob Nightingales, the Ken Rosenthal's, they're all down there. And right now, the hot stove, I don't even know if it's turned on. I don't even know if it has gas in it as of right this very moment. So we shall see when we get to Thursday's podcast, and that's the day when it concludes. But for all intents and purposes, once you get to Wednesday night, that's when it'll really start to die down. But strange things have happened. You know I'll be on top of it. Jeff Kent, by the baseball committee of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a committee, not competitions committee, it's the contemporary, thank you. The baseball contemporary era have elected Jeff Kent into the Hall of Fame. I believe he got 12 of the 16 votes where he needed, maybe got 13. But I understand he may not be the guy that's full of rainbows, sunshine, coconuts, and palm trees, but he has hit the most home runs by a second baseman, has put up MVP numbers, was an MVP in 2000, prolific hitter. I believe batted 285. Was a good fielder, not Gold Glove. He's not Roberto Alomar, but wasn't a guy that was a butcher there at second base. And I get it, he played on a bunch of teams. What hat does he go in? I would think San Francisco. But remember, came up Toronto, got traded for David Cone. Remember that trade? Jeff Kent, Ryan Thompson for David Cone. A lot of people forget about that. He was a Met and had that good start to the 94 year where he hit a bunch of home runs. And that was the year they went to strike. But then after that, gets traded, goes to so many teams, San Francisco, the Dodgers, Houston, you name it. But for Kent, I have no problem with the committee picking him to go to the Hall of Fame. And now we got to wait and see on the likes of Bonds and Clemens and guys like that, Gary Sheffield, who got less than 5 of the votes. And you got to get at least 5 because remember, 16, you want to get more than a quarter. Now they will be up somewhere down the road based on this cyclical process, because if you get less than 5, you're off the ballot. But I guess they're going to get a reprieve, another go-round for the aforementioned to see whether or not that the committee will elect them at least to get 5 votes or more to be a part of it. So who knows? But if the second go-around they get less than 5, then they're out for good. So something to keep in mind there when it comes to those guys as far as being in the Hall of Fame. And then you had some sad news. Tom Hicks, the former Ranger, also owned the Dallas Stars, but we all know Tom Hicks, who signed A-Rod to the big deal, $252 million back in 2000, and him being the head of the ball club at that time, 79 years of age, way too young. Even Jerry Jones had some sentiments that he wanted to share about Hicks being a friend and obviously being in the same town and I'm sure the same circles, etc. But for him, thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Hicks family, the Rangers, Major League Baseball, etc. on his passing. 79. Don't know what the cause of his death was, but that's what you have there. And that'll do it, my good people. Another episode in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about the wonderful toy department of life, otherwise known as sports. And as I mentioned earlier, and I'll mention one more time, if you haven't subscribed, please do so, people. The YouTube channel, at JAYREELZ. I just eclipsed 800 subscribers. Thanks to those who made that push past it. I was trying to push everybody when I was at 792, 795, and we got past it. But now I want to try to get to 1,000 before January 1. Can we do that, people? Can you share it with your family, friends, foes, frenemies? Take a screenshot on social media where I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. If you could do that, it'll go a long way into helping out the channel, trying to generate income from this particular avenue as I carve a trail and a path to be not only a credible, informative, and entertaining, let me enunciate, podcast host, but more importantly, real, unlike any other, true sports talk, passionate sports talk, none of this clickbait, rage bait nonsense that you get everywhere else, and not here. You're going to get the truth, people. So if you could go ahead and do that, I'd appreciate it. I'm also on Apple, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you listen to. And if you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you could do so at the aforementioned social media accounts or the email address, the jayreelzpodcast@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA since birth. And where else are you going to get all this on one podcast? I didn't even talk about the MMA bantamweight bout the other night where there was an upset. Maybe I'll touch on that some other time, but this is what you're going to get. Your one-stop shopping for sports talk, unlike any other. I don't know of another podcast out there that has that. That's not only going to deliver the passion, fire, energy, fury, and that's a promise. Anytime I sit in front of this camera and microphone to deliver all that's happening in sports, whether that's on the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it, From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the foot, baby.